Hey friends, it's Jeannie and I'm here to share this fun rainbow colored card that is part of Trinity Stamp's 5th birthday release and video hop. For today's card, I'm using the Celebration Cupcake stamp, number candles, and abstract scratch background. So before we talk about the card, there is a giveaway here on YouTube and on Instagram and also in the Trinity Facebook group. So be sure to stop by and leave a comment for a chance to win. There's also a free stamp and die set that's part of the birthday celebration if you spend more than $100. So be sure to stop by the store and check it out. I'm starting off this card with a bit of masking, and it's pretty simple masking because I wanted 3 cupcakes with candles, and of course I had to do a bit of masking. If you are not a person that loves to mask, you can also use the coordinating dies, but all of these images are pretty simple, and I think that it wasn't too bad masking off these items. My idea is that I wanted my first cupcake, which is front and center, to have the number 5 candle, which celebrates Trinity's 5th birthday, and also you can use it for a little kid's birthday who's turning 5. So it's a nice card to have in your stash. Once I mask and stamp that number 5 down, I'll go ahead and stamp out my cupcake. So for masking, you always want to mask your item that you want out in front first, and then you work your way backwards. So this is what I'm doing with the cupcake. The number 5 will be out in front first, and then the cupcake will be behind it, and then I'll stamp and mask that out. I decided to go ahead and mask off all the cupcakes in this card. There's going to be a total of 3, and mainly that's because I wanted to use the abstract scratch background as part of the background just to give it a little bit of interest and texture. So for the candles, I'm doing the same exact thing as the number 5. Since the candle is out in front, you want to stamp that first, mask it off, and then stamp out your cupcake. So that is what I'm doing, and then I'll repeat it for the right hand side of the card, and it's pretty simple. You just kind of have to work your way backwards, and I have quite a few videos on masking where it's a little bit more complicated, and I'll create a template to help me figure out which items I'm supposed to be stamping out first, masking, and then, stamping. So I'm showing all the steps throughout this video just so you have a clear idea of how I created this, and then you can create it yourself as well. I really like how the cupcakes look, super fun. And as a disclaimer, I actually made this card twice. Once because I used all solid colors for my coloring of the cupcakes, so each of the cupcakes was one color, and I didn't really love it. It just looked a little plain, so I went back, re-stamped this entire thing, and then decided to color it in rainbow coloring. The funny thing is that I actually ended up kind of messing with the solid colors and just adding the same little texture bits that I do on this card. And then I went in and hand drew some designs on the cupcake holder. So it actually turned out really cute. And I probably should share that card too when I post this, but we'll see. Let's see if I take photos of it. So because I had masked and stamped off everything, I can go ahead and stamp my background. I pulled out the abstract scratch background, which I think is pretty unique and is very subtle texture that works really well as a background, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm also picking this teal color because Trinity's signature color is teal, and I really wanted to pay tribute to that as well. So I'm using the blending buddy and just ink blending right over, keeping my color more concentrated on the corners just because I wanted that look of dimension. For the bottom part of this card, I just went in with black soot. My favorite part of masking is to remove all the mask, which I do pretty carefully. I sometimes will need like a little pick just to pull it off because it does stick pretty well, and it does make it easier just to pick up those pieces. And the only finicky part was that little candle flame, which there is a stamp for, and there's actually 2 stamps that you can layer on. So you can use yellow and orange and really create that dimension for the flame, but it wasn't that big of a deal. I was going to color in the 2 candles on the right and left hand side anyway, and I was just going to color in that part of the candle. I decided to go with chocolate cupcakes. I knew that I wanted to go in with rainbow coloring, so I wanted a very neutral color for the actual cupcake, and I went with chocolate because I just love chocolate anything. If I am at a restaurant and there is a dessert, it's a choice between chocolate and anything else, I will always pick the chocolate. For the candle itself, this is my normal coloring because it's a solid color. I go in with 3 colors. I start with my darkest color, creating where I want the shadows, then I'll blend it out with my middle color, and then use my lightest color to blend everything out. And for this teal combination, I use BG18, BG13, and BG11, which is kind of hard to blend out, but it does work out. So it is a perfect combination for this really pretty teal, but I will say it is a little bit finicky only because the BG11 is so light. Let's move on to the rainbow coloring. In this video, you'll notice that it is a much longer video than my usual videos these days, mainly because I wanted to keep all of the coloring in this portion. So I went in with this idea of doing a rainbow colored cupcake, and I am picking out all my markers ahead of time, and usually I stick with 3 Copic markers, but here, because I wanted a little bit more dimension, I actually decided to pull out 4. So there's this really dark color for every single color that I'm using of the rainbow. So for the pink, I pull out like this dark red. For the orange, I pick out this like red corally color, and then I'll place down all the shadows, and I'll just repeat the same way of my coloring. The only part that you really need to focus on are the colors that will be blending together. So usually it's the lightest color. So for my pinks, it was R81, and for my orange, it was, I believe, YG12, and you just want to make sure that those colors go together. And because these are the rainbow colors, these are colors that will blend well with each other. So I'm not picking like pink and trying to blend it with green, because that wouldn't work. That would just make brown. So I picked colors that would work together and that can be blended well together with those lighter colors. So green blends well with yellow, and I use YG01 and Y02 just to blend those together. And sometimes you do have to work it in a little bit, but it does work out, and it looks so pretty because the transition just looks really nice. And your darkest colors are where all the shadows are, and usually that's on the outer edge of the cupcake itself. So you'll see if you're paying attention to the coloring, I've been really trying hard not to get in the way of the coloring, but it's just how I hold my Copic markers, or my markers and pens in general. I kind of hold it straight up, so I tend to block my coloring a lot. So I'm kind of tilting it a little bit so you guys can see like how I'm coloring. But I like to work in small areas. Usually I don't go too heavy-handed with my shadow colors, and I leave a lot of light space because that is what creates the highlights. Of course, the colors that you're using really determine how it ends up looking, but usually the colors blend out really nicely and you get that dimensional look. And it might not look super dimensional like when you're looking at it, but if you're comparing to using just one Copic marker, it won't look as flat compared to this. So I really liked it. I think the most difficult colors to really blend were the blue and the purple, but luckily blue and purple just blend so flawlessly together, and it just took a couple of times over each other. Since the Copics are transparent, they kind of go over all the colors, and you can really see that blend just transition nicely. I went in and added a little bit more shadow underneath the candle and the number 5 candle, just because, you know, you're putting it into the cupcake, so it kind of creates a divot. And then I decided that I wanted to do the same colors for the cupcake holders as well. So I picked the color that is on the top of the cupcake for the bottom of the cupcake holder, and we're kind of doing the same blend. I do use all 4 colors of each Copic marker set, and I'm not the best at trying to figure out where the shadows are, especially like the cupcake middle area. So I would think that that would kind of like, I don't know. I colored it how I colored it. I stuck to one side, and then in the middle I kind of colored in the middle instead of like towards one side, if that makes sense. And I think it worked out. So I left my highlights either on the left hand side or the right hand side of the little cupcake divots, and that was able to create that dimension. And you want that shadowing because these are little cupcake holders that are folded in, and where it's folded is where the shadows are. And Again, with the blue and purple, it was a little bit harder to blend out, but it worked out and I think it looks really nice. And then I'm going to go in with my markers to do the rest of the cupcake holders. And I think that this looked so pretty by itself. Once I finish coloring it, you'll see that I do go in and add a bit of white gel pen to the top of the cupcakes, which kind of makes it look glittery. And I thought that was like the perfect touch. I had contemplated whether I wanted to like draw in little, sprinkles or anything like that, but I just didn't want to mess with it because I was just so happy with the coloring. But for the original card that I made like a pink cupcake, a purple cupcake, and a yellow cupcake. And it just looked really, really plain. But my lesson that I learned, which I should have filmed it, was just to add a bit of design to it, and it really elevates your card. So what I did there was I used white gel pen on the top of the cupcakes, and then I just hand drew in some like circles and hearts on the actual cupcake holders, and it just made it look not so plain. So anytime you think something looks plain on it, add stripes, add dots, it just elevates it. And for the coloring, I think that it was pretty fun to do. It's one of those cards, this is one of those cards that I just sit down, stamp out, and I put on a TV show just to watch. And recently I had been watching Succession, which has finally ended, and it was on HBO, and because it was the final season, I decided to watch all 4 seasons again. So I started from the very first season and then like went on. I think I'm a completist, and then also I have a terrible memory, especially with TV shows, because I watch so many that I really need to refresh unless it's like a favorite. Like one of my favorite TV shows is Sex and the City, and like I know those episodes like the back of my hand. I'm just so familiar with it, but it's because I've watched them so many times. And then I can't even believe that Sex and the City has been on for 25 years. It's nuts. So I remember watching it when I used to work at Blockbuster, which is another throwback. All right, for the sentiment, I decided that I wanted to go ahead and heat emboss the Celebrate sentiment, and I used my anti-static powder tool, which is the Rabbit Hole Designs Cottontail embossing tool, which I really like. I'm still like learning to use it because sometimes it just pulls out too much powder, but it works really well. And then I'll stamp it with embossing ink and then use white embossing powder and heat set it. And the sentiment honestly was an afterthought. I wasn't really sure where I wanted to put it, but it just ended up being perfect in the corner of this card, and it really stands out because of that black background that I have on this like cupcake table. And luckily it stood up against that green that I have at the bottom of my main cupcake. Here is where I add the gel pen. I got a set of 3 of these. These are the Arteza white gel pens. They come in different ballpoint sizes. So I use the 0.6 and then the 1.0. The 1.0 is just obviously thicker, and then that creates more of the depth on the little glitter bits. And I think it just adds to it. It kind of makes it look like it's glowing or it's glittery. And I think it's really pretty. So this is the card. Remember to stop by the blog, the videos, and Instagram for a chance to win one of the prizes for Trinity's 5th birthday release. And I will see you guys next time with another video. Bye.